In the early 90s, girls were going crazy over Polly Pocket. And why shouldn't they? These portable playsets were awesome. So naturally, Bluebird Toys, the very same company behind Polly Pocket, created a new product. This time filling a similar niche but aimed at young boys. That's right, today we're talking about Mighty Max. And believe me, this was very much my jam. Here's one I kept, because it was my first, and because of dinosaurs. It's called Mighty Max Blows Up Dino Lab. There's a raptor and a cage to keep them in, a pterodactyl, and check out the volcano. It opens up, and there's a turret inside. Shortly after the launch of the first wave of toys, Mighty Max quickly made his way to the airwaves and starred in his own excellent cartoon series. Along with his friends Norman the Warrior and Virgil the Talking Owl Wizard, Max would use his magical hat to open portals and travel through time and space, battling monsters and going on crazy adventures. Anyway, you probably know where this is going. With something this successful, the next most logical step is a video game. And unfortunately, this is where Mighty Max finally dropped the ball. The Adventures of Mighty Max, released for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, is a 2D action platformer with some puzzle elements. At the time, this was pretty standard practice for adapting popular IPs into games. It certainly worked out well for Disney. The developers at Ocean probably should have just kept things simple, but instead of making a linear run and jump style game, they went for something unexpected. And it didn't really work. The instruction manual gives some basic story, but it's light and doesn't really matter. In short, your goal is to assemble a super weapon to defeat the evil Skullmaster. The pieces are scattered around 5 different worlds, each with a number of maze-like sub-levels. If it was just a matter of finding collectibles, maybe things wouldn't be so bad. But unfortunately, the weapon pieces are heavy, which means Max needs to find ways to literally drag them to the nearest portal. There's other things wrong with this game too, but right here, this is the big one. The idea itself isn't terrible, as an occasional objective to break up the action. The problem is, this is the whole game. You start each level by checking the top of the screen. Here you'll find how many pieces you need to recover, and right next to the counter is a white arrow. This is the only thing that helps make the game remotely enjoyable. It'll direct you to the nearest piece or portal, depending on your current objective. Trust me, I couldn't imagine playing this game if I needed to figure this all out on my own. Anyway, once the piece counter is down to 0, you hop in the portal, the screen goes black, and the process repeats itself. Let me tell you, moving these pieces around is a real pain. They stop you from jumping and you can only throw them so far, so you're often forced to rely on your environment. Balloons, seesaws, magnets, anything you can find to get these suckers just a little closer to your goal. The silver lining is that the levels often feature multiple portals, so if one is easier to reach, just gather the pieces together and move them toward it step by step. Doesn't that sound like fun? To be fair, I appreciate the puzzle element to a degree, and I can respect the developers for at least trying to make something unique, but more often than not, it just feels like work. Control-wise, Mighty Max is okay. Movement is snappy, and by using the shoulder pads, you can edge left or right, which does come in handy when precisely transporting a piece to a moving platform. Max also has a pretty insane jump. Seriously, it puts Mario to shame. I don't want to say it's hard to control, but it's very unwieldy and kinda ridiculous. As for the reason, my only guess is that it's a bit of a band-aid fix. Verticality is necessary for making the act of moving the pieces challenging. But if it was equally hard for Max to reach those heights, it would bloat the length of levels and make an annoying gameplay loop even worse. The unintended side effect, however, is how it complicates enemy engagements. This should be pretty basic stuff, but because you jump so high, everything is needlessly finicky. Let me explain. Each level is populated by a variety of monsters. When you jump to higher platforms, there's a good chance of colliding with an enemy you didn't see and taking damage. Yes, there's an option to scroll the screen and look before you leap, but who wants to bother with that? Your best bet is to take your time and clear out any enemies you encounter. This will make things easier once you have a weapon piece in hand. Thankfully, Mighty Max is one of those games where enemies stay dead. Your main method of attack is a ping-pong ball gun. You can fire a single shot or charge it for more of a shotgun effect. It's a bit easier to hit targets with the charge shot, but it leaves you somewhat vulnerable. Usually it's better to try to snipe them with a single ball. Unless, of course, you're talking about flying enemies. Combined with your insane jump height and the lack of directional aiming, they're pretty tough to hit. Whenever possible, I try to kill them by throwing either enemies or even weapon pieces. Oh, and since we're talking about monsters, I just have to show you this. Mighty Max survives Corpus, still in its original packaging. In the game, you fight penguins and sharks and mummies. The designs are fine, whatever. But check out the pictures on the back. Mighty Max battles Skull Warrior. Mighty Max versus Chronosaur. Mighty Max hounds Werewolf. They all sound way more interesting, don't they? The Mighty Max world offers such a great canvas for a game. And I know it's a cliche to say that the developers squandered the potential of the IP, but in this case, it's absolutely true. In terms of level design, Mighty Max is a mixed bag. The open environments mostly feel samey, and ironically I wound up having more fun with the levels that were clearly less thought out. You can really tell when the developers put effort into hiding pieces and portals, and when they decide to just drop things at random. But hey, after so many cycles of the same thing, I welcome the chance to end my suffering sooner. Another big issue, and I don't know how else to word this, was poorly telegraphed walls. Check out this level in the Inca Ruins world. One column is solid, and the other you can walk right through. In this case, the impassable one is at the edge of the screen, so maybe it makes sense. But this problem persists across every world. Whether you can jump through the ground to a higher elevation is a total crapshoot. It might even be 50-50, without any indication whatsoever. Sometimes the ground is thick and you can pass right through, and other times it's super thin and Max just bumps his head. Really, any kind of distinction would have helped a lot, whether it be foliage, bricks, or even a simple recolor. Aesthetically, the various worlds are once again rather generic. They're colorful and generally pleasing to look at, but that's about it. There's nothing really interesting about the volcano or the jungle. These are the kinds of places you visited a million times in other games. Oh, and if you're wondering about all the collectibles, yes, there's a ton of them, and they change based on the stage theme, but most of them are just there for score, which nobody is going to care about. Yeah, go ahead and tell your friends you just beat your own high score in the Adventures of Mighty Max. They'll have you committed. Only a handful of pickups really matter. The cap grants you temporary invincibility. There's a stop sign to freeze enemies, a heart which gives you a free life, and 2 summons. The megaphone calls the warrior Norman to run alongside you and chop at enemies. Although his effectiveness is so random, it's better not to rely on him. And the wishbone will allow you to contact Virgil for some helpful advice. I mean, just look at this. Talk about crucial information. The Adventures of Mighty Max is not a long game, thankfully. For those with inhuman patience and nothing better to do, it can be completed in a single afternoon, and the password system allows you to play it in smaller chunks if you prefer. I would say the ending is a major letdown, but it would be wrong to expect anything in the first place. This game doesn't feature any boss encounters, so the fact that Max defeats Skullmaster in a cutscene is fine. Really, it bothers me more that there's not even really a last level. This is because the game doesn't have a standardized progression. At the beginning, you can choose between the volcano and the space station, and once you clear one, a new option appears. So for some, the jungle might be the end, and for others, they might let one of those first 2 stages linger around until they have no choice but to play it. So it's just business as usual until the credits roll. I feel at the very least, the developers could have made an extra difficult stage set within Skull Mountain. Or, if that's asking too much, rename the volcano and make us play that last. Anything to give some significance to the end of your journey. In terms of replay value, there's nothing here. There's no harder difficulty or unlockable secrets. And the choice of characters is a lie, since they all play the same. Needless to say, the Adventures of Mighty Max sucks, and you should probably avoid it. I wouldn't go as far as to call it unplayable, but basic competence isn't really a selling point either. Even for fans of the franchise, there's just not much here. Aside from a few supporting characters popping in for brief appearances, there's almost nothing to remind you of either the show or the toys. Mighty Max? More like Mighty Meh.